with senior staff and with the city manager. And one of the things that we were challenged to do is to identify what are our goals for the coming year. And of course, new kid on the block, I have a lot to learn. And Brett mentioned that he'll be interested in seeing kind of what's my fresh take, what's my fresh assessment. So some of these comments are kind of that fresh perspective, and maybe admittedly, maybe I haven't got it right. I mean, I've only been here not even quite a month yet, so. But in general, I just want to let you know that my perception is that the general plan can be a very strong tool when working with community members and specifically with the development community. If we're really invested in the general plan, we've created a real vision that we believe in. This is just a common quote that I really enjoy. Daniel Burnham is considered to be the father of modern city planning. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the book, The Devil in the White City, very popular. Talks about the creation of the White City, the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, and then later on he was hired by many cities to go out and do master plans. And technically that's where the modern profession of city planning came from, is from the 1909 Chicago plan. So the idea is not necessarily in scale to think big, but we always set master plans or general plans in the future to allow us to dream, to give us enough perspective thinking, you know, what we might not see us accomplishing something in 5 years or 10 years, but if we allow ourselves to think 20 or 30 years or longer, perhaps, we might be able to accomplish some big things in our community. However, I also love this quote from President Eisenhower when he was a general. In preparing for battle, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. While we're going through the planning process, we learn so much about our communities. And this speaks to that desire to be nimble, to be able to take advantage of the RSLs of the world, to jump through those hoops and make that possible. But I think that has actually created some of the challenges that I'm observing that this community has. We've been dealing with rapid growth. It's needed that we've had to make frequent amendments to our master plan. And I think ultimately it's kind of weakened the vision a little bit. We have a low commitment to our plan because we're so willing to make adjustments based on what we think maybe is highest and best use for our community and for our development community. So we've really shown a preference for flexibility. But the consequence of that is it creates low predictability for everyone. I got a phone call last week from a prospective buyer. Somebody who's just looking at buying a home in the community, and they were wanting to know, well, what's going to happen behind me? You know, that's a common question. That's something that we get all the time. What's going to happen, you know, in my neighborhood or this place that I'm looking at making an investment in? So whether it's a resident, a business, or a developer, everybody wants predictability to the best of our ability. So another point here is we need to accurately convey the vision of the city and guide development. I think a new general plan is needed. We've all been talking about this, that we need to create a new plan that we can believe in, that we can have faith in, that we agree to. So we want to increase our commitment and implement our vision and improve that predictability. We've also been talking that there are some immediate concerns, that it seems like there is possibly broad support, that there are some things that maybe we should do quickly to take advantage of some opportunities. So what are some of the solutions? We've identified last time that the council wanted to begin crafting your sense of vision, your outline of your values, and communicate that to the Planning Commission. The Commission is asking for that as we begin this process of amending the general plan. Initiate development of the new comprehensive general plan, which will require a consultant. That's what we're anticipating will be required. And we really want a robust, inclusive, and transparent public process. And as you know, there's a number of other planning documents that we've been working on, parks, trails, roads, and so that will all influence and become a part of this. And again, identify which general plan amendments should be addressed now. One of the things that was mentioned specifically is we want to make sure that we align our plan with the vision. And we will be preparing a number of white papers summarizing some of these studies that you've been asking for, or asked for at this last meeting. So again, it's going to take some time for you to flesh out what you think the vision is and communicate that to the Planning Commission and the staff. But that's a near-term thing. That's something that you can work on and relatively soon deliver that. I can produce that. Obviously, reviewing the language of the general plan is going to take longer. That's probably part of the larger effort. But I thought it was interesting as we were talking about values. This was a wordle that was in the current general plan, the 2014 version of the general plan. And then there was one that was done for the 2016. Now this was in response to what do you like in Harriman? So maybe a different question preceded these two wordles. But I personally really like that the word community is prominent in both of these wordles. Of course, we're familiar that the larger the word, the more frequent they appeared in the responses that we were surveying. And first, in my profession, personally, I believe that community is one of the key desirable objectives that we achieve, that I help you achieve as a city planner. There was also a question about looking at densities in the general plan. So I picked out all of the residential density ranges that are in the currently adopted plan. If you want to come back and maybe spend a little time talking about this tonight. Again, as we make any adjustments to these ranges, it will have an impact with the zoning as well. So this is not a quick fix, but maybe it's a reference for some discussion. We've identified areas that we would call stable. Now this map is not the full extent of stable neighborhoods, but it's an illustration of realizing that a number of areas in the city have development agreements. So a developer in the city have entered into an agreement. Those areas are essentially planned. And unless the developer in the city agree to change those contracts, those areas of the city we're not likely to impact or influence through a general plan update. And there are other areas in the city that we are basically currently developed and planned and would be considered stable areas. Areas of change. This map is representing those areas that we think warrant further review, further refinement to the master plan, and looking for some opportunities for direction from the community, commission, and the council. Now, I labeled this as areas of opportunity. These are the areas that we've been identifying as a staff, saying we're concerned about some potential immediate impacts if we don't change the general plan and correspondingly the zoning maps for these properties. And I have a list so we've identified essentially 10 areas, and these are the 10 that are on that map. Again, we can go back to these and have a conversation. We're anticipating that what the council may do for us tonight is tell us procedurally how you want us to respond to these 10 issues. Are these issues that we have broad agreement and that we would like to see these be essentially moved kind of accelerated or separately from the longer general plan process that we're anticipating that we need? So these are the 10 areas that we're recommending that you consider for direction to staff. We also, you had requested you want to have a conversation on process on how to respond to the Addison property. We know that this version of the plan is been changed slightly since we've seen that with the city council. But this again is just for conversation tonight, just an image. And then the Danzy property as well is something that we would like to get some direction from you on as far as how do you want to process that. So again, these are all reference for your conversation tonight. Probably this section is a prime concern for us on the staff level. And then of course, listening to any thoughts you have initially on your vision that you would like to communicate to the Planning Commission. I imagine that's something that you're getting to work on over multiple meetings potentially. Obviously, once you get those white papers and that presentation to you, that will be a good tool for you to help you work on that. So we're here and ready to listen to your direction on these issues.
On those 10 properties, if you want, we can go through and kind of explain quickly if you have any questions on those. Our idea is, if it's not unanimously supported, we just drop them off. If it's something that you're comfortable with, that's what we move forward with. And then, in association to the Danzy and the Addison property, we wanted to just talk about what you envision in the process. Because one of the things that the council has not been comfortable with doing is having a project brought to them that night, have public comments, and then adopting them that night. And so what we're suggesting is that if you kind of have a timeline of when you want to get those things, we've heard of, February and trying to get those things knocked off, that our next meeting is the 25th, that's maybe where we bring some plans, but it does also something else, is that the recommendations you have from the Planning Commission are on a different plan than you're seeing on both of those. So we want to make sure we have a time to articulate the conditions you plan to put on those plans, as opposed to try to write them up the night you're approving them. We're very apt to make a mistake or overlook something. So getting those into the front of the public for comment in council meetings is going to be critical if we're going to make any kind of timeline. So I just want you to think about that. So back to, we're here to listen. I'm going to write something down. And you're going to tell me what to write.
Gordon, I'd like it maybe if you or Mike, either one, take just a minute, specific to the 10 parcels of opportunity, and really just talk about, and maybe you could do as you said and highlight them briefly, but then talk about what really our options for process are on those, and a recommendation really of what,
How that could go.
how you think it should go, how it could go, and how you think it should go.
All right, so I will start down here. This property is adjacent to Camp Williams. This green is here. They have the road through here. We don't want to see any residential through here at all, so our recommendation is that this would be all commercial.
Is that within the ACUP funding zone?
Yes, and we're negotiating with this property, and he's agreed to sell. We're just waiting for the next batch of funding, and we would end up making an offer and probably end up purchasing at that time. But in the meantime, our goal would be is to give the message to the base that we don't have commercial or residential. This is Kim Reynolds' box piece. They gave us some property for a water line and for a road. In return, we rezoned his properties commercial, and we've gone through the general plan to general plan it commercial, and we didn't, and it's still residential. On the general plan, there's actually zone commercial, so we'd like to zone it commercial.
That was a promise we made.
Right, so I'd say that's, so if you see anything, this is part of Rosecrest. They want to add some additional office and commercial into this area. It just expands what we can do there.
I'm so upset by that.
So we're probably,
I'm not.
there's a piece here that we want to zone commercial. It's MU. We just want to make sure everybody gets a message. There's not any housing on that. It's just a C2 office commercial zone. This is one I don't want to talk much about, but that's residential. It's right on the Mountain View corridor. We'd like to see your opinion if that should be commercial. These property owners would like to see this commercial. In the general plan, we're negotiating with people, and this will come up later in the meeting. We want to have a clear indication on a general plan that that should be commercial. This is a city-owned property. It's currently in the general plan as open space, but we want to make sure the public doesn't think that this is going to be a park that's living back here. So we think it's critical to show on the general plan, commercial, if we use it, public works, or sell it to a developer, it's not going to be residential, it's not going to be a park. And we don't want a developer or retail or realtor telling them, oh, that's a public property, it's likely to be a park. We want to make sure it's indicated clearly that it's not what the use could be. This is a piece of property that was purchased for a church site. And then the city owns some property in the front. The back property is about 5 acres. We own about 2 in the front. We have the Danzy dental thing that went up front. I would see an opportunity for commercial there. And what I'm looking at is we have a hospital here. When I went and visited Brett when he had his knee replaced and he was drugged, the building that they drug him doesn't have to be those rehab.
Well, he doesn't remember it.
Oh, he signed things, don't you worry, I took care of that. So, but what they do is they put you in this rehab but those aren't like destinations. So I'm thinking that there's kinds of things like that that would suit a good 5-acre piece that would be a benefit. We have a senior housing project of 300 units right across the street. We have another senior housing project here. So we're talking to several medical groups to try to entice them there. And that little strip is sandwiched between the apartments and the yes, that strip, exactly that piece between the townhomes, apartment, and the junior high. I'm saying let's not put any more housing in there. We got plenty. Let's see if we can put some more services that would go there. So I'm suggesting that if somebody comes in and swaps that property out with the LDS church because they've determined they're not going to build a church there, it's going to be swapped. I'd rather, before the swap takes place, that we have indicated what our choice is. And again, this council gets to say that direction. This may be controversial, but this is part of the Addison, the 50 acres versus the 10 acres, and I'm letting you weigh in. I said we could jump that quicker, but that's a decision of this group. And then lastly, the 1,000 acres out here to change that from residential to industrial. So actually, it's a TM. It was C2. Is it like what was it?
It's light industrial business park.
Light industrial business
That
park.
fits with that property where they have a desire to do the buffer.
So if any of those have any controversy, we yank them. If they're ones you're comfortable with, then the thought would be is we have a general plan notice that we're going forward with. We could inform the planning commission of these, give them the same story we just gave you. We would have to hold an open house. Then it would have to go to a planning commission public hearing. Then they would make a recommendation, and it could be that night or it could be a following meeting. And then you're allowed to act on it after that. And then we would renotice and reopen a new general plan, probably the very next 10 days, put it in the paper, and start everything that Mike said to you.
Why this is appealing to me is, when we get back to fundamental, I'm having a wardrobe malfunction as I'm talking here. I'm just going to sit in this position because I can't move. Why this is appealing to me?
This is going to be a better meeting all the time.
I'm really medicated people work with me. Why this is appealing to me is this, we've talked about transparency and listening to our residents. These 10, because I can't separate, parcels meets with the philosophy that the previous council put into place and that speaks directly to the wants of our residents, which is less residential for higher and best uses. So every single parcel that you've identified is meeting the feedback that we've received from our residents and fits in with the philosophy that the previous council talked about, that I sense the existing council also agrees with, and shows that we are in fact listening to our residents in an immediate fashion. And then we come out with very strong statements that show we're listening to our residents, and then we continue forward with a very thorough, comprehensive process that again builds that confidence with our residents. So I like the direction. I'm wholly supportive. I think all of these 10 parcels need to be locked up for higher and better uses, just as you've outlined.
I missed the reality. That was one thing that Jared brought up, but we wanted to rezone it.
There we go.
Commercial.
Free.
So,
No, we're not going to do that.
After the fact.
I would agree. I think that all 5 members of the previous council were in agreement on all these areas. I don't think that was ever discussed. Otherwise, discussions we had with residents, even the referendum group, I don't think that any of those areas were an issue for them. So
Because again, it's less residential for alternate uses that we need for the sustainability of our city, whether that be job creation, retail opportunities, destination opportunities, preservation of land, all of that fits in with the goals that we all share.
I was gonna say, it preserves those areas in a kind of non-invasive way. It's not gonna derail this process or take us away from.
Well, and quite the contrary, I think it
gonna help,
bolsters the process because it is,
Signals
very
our-
definite actions of listening to the feedback that we've gotten.
It signals our clear intent, and we're all in agreement on those, and
I have a couple questions real quick. So, Adeline, is that one? So, number one, is the property owner amenable to that zoning change?
This is a, general plan change, but yeah, he's seen it.
Okay. And
Seen it and being amenable to it are two different.
He's amenable.
You better.
the plan he showed me today
Pin him
shows
down.
it.
He's amenable to it, so
I
let me
know.
restate that, he's amenable and is supportive of this.
Thank you. Is this 8 and 9 down here?
Yeah.
When you were talking about this in the ACUP, you were talking about both pieces?
Actually, the front is actually already, I
The
think,
front is mixed use, do we change it to commercial?
I think this is mixed use and then this was just residential, so we do the whole thing as C2, so it's two parcels, but we would,
Is it the same property owner?
yes.
Okay, that's what and then, which is this 5 right here in the middle?
Yeah.
Unfortunately for me, I don't wanna talk about it, is not sufficient for me to make an informed decision. If we don't wanna talk about it, that's fine, but I'm not comfortable.
The
you know,
property owner would not be happy if you do this, they'll be very ticked off, and they will express it.
Which would be a good thing.
I think I'll speak to it a little bit, and if I'm going out of bounds, but I think that's okay. This is one of those few areas remaining along Mountain View corridor that is our only transportation corridor. I think we have to do what we can with those remaining areas to preserve them for potential use. If it proves not to be viable, it can go back the other way, but once houses go up there, we can never go back.
Sure, I understand that.
My only concern is process. I just think process is important. I think that we've heard lots of feedback during the last several months about you guys didn't follow the proper process, or how come you weren't following process, and it concerns me that this would be a quick and not the process that's
So maybe,
being
I don't know,
expected.
Mike wants to speak to the difference between this and actual zoning?
Yeah, we would follow the correct process as required by state law and city code.
Of course.
And I use the term accelerated just to separate it from the longer, more robust general plan. That it seems like we're all in agreement, we eventually need to do that.
So by
If we-
thinking,
if
tell me
we-
if I'm wrong,
If we take these 10 and wait,
We lose the
we're under the impression that things won't happen before we complete our
this
general
would
plan
be
update.
changing the zoning.
Right,
This would just
Right.
be
Amending-
changing,
amending the plan.
amending
Yeah.
the plan, which
Right.
just tells those property owners, this is our intention.
And I'll go back to the comment that Nicole made in our work meeting last week, and that is that we have to recognize there's been a tremendous amount of work that's already been done, that everyone's in agreement on, that I don't think we need to just completely throw out the window and start over with a long process. While I agree with you, we need to be very transparent about what that process is. But that we do follow the process and protect the city's best interest moving forward.
Yeah, I don't disagree that it needs to be protected, 100% agree with that, and same, I respect the work that's been put into it, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. But I just wanna make sure that if we're telling the public, this is the accelerated process, sometimes it sends up red flags. Oh, what are you accelerating and what are we missing here? So it just.
I don't
needs to be
think
clear.
we've used the term
yeah,
accelerated.
that's probably
Well,
not
we
the,
did tonight,
Yes,
no, they're
yeah.
listening to that, so.
yeah. And I apologize.
So, once again, what's the zoning currently on that particular piece of property?
Which one? 5?
Single family.
The zoning is currently A1. The
A1.
general plan is currently single family.
Single family, like that yellow color?
And I'm with the intent that this is a change solely to our vision on the general plan. I don't have any issue moving forward with that particular item. With that clear understanding that we are making our position known. We want to have a clear expectation, and to me, this is part of transparency. This is what we want. If this is what we want, we should have it on our general plan that way. And so I see the value of having it as commercial, and I don't necessarily have a problem. I just wanna make sure we're calling a horse and saying, yes, this is us making a clear statement that this is what we want.
Oh, yes.
Well,
That's how it
and
will be
for
perceived.
process, right, we'd still follow, as you mentioned, public hearings, planning commission, vote next meeting, public hearing, council, et cetera, so we'll have those discussions, but that's dangerous. We wanna give the due process to the remainder of the plan that we know we need to work on. And however long that takes us could be detrimental with these pieces.
And to me, the communication piece, to your point, Sherry, comes to, if you look at the existing, medium density, high density, even single family, medium density, if you're gonna communicate, I don't think there's a stronger message you can communicate than to say, residents, we've heard you, and we are taking X number of acres from a use that we know you're unhappy with and converting it to a use that, by and large, everybody admits we need more of in Harriman. So to me, that is absolute responsiveness, immediate responsiveness on something that we don't disagree that our residents want and we know we need. So in terms of the communication of that, I think it's a really strong story to tell. And again, not doing it, I think there's a much harder story to tell 6 months from now or whenever this process is done to say, we wanted to do this, but I'm sorry, we've now missed out on the opportunity and we're stuck with whatever.
So when we communicate though, can we communicate that portion of it too? This is why this is going through now, because we have to preserve and protect
I
that.
think that was kind of my point, is I wanna be
Yeah.
open and honest and transparent about it. And this, I think we can't be more transparent than what our intention is, other than putting it on the general plan and saying, this is what we want. You have your zoning right as you have now, but if you wanna change it, this is what we expect you to change it to. And so I think that's being fair and open as our residents are asking us to be.
Yeah.
So you have, as far as that's concerned, you have my nod to go ahead with all 10 of these.
Yeah, as far as direction goes.
Okay, we'll convey this information to the planning commission, and you should see this back within probably 30 days or so.
All eyes are on Tammy for that communication piece.
It's a good story to tell.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first item. There was other things we need to discuss.
So, I'm gonna skip over the things he said, which is this stuff, because this is the important, but it takes some more thought. So I'm gonna go to these two pieces.
I'm actually gonna ask you to just go back,
I will.
cause this is, I think this is the part, at least in my conversations with residents, where I think most people feel, and I felt through the process, we've kinda gone askew when we talk about the general plan. We started off good about talking about the vision, and we went right to the maps. And in the time I've been here, I don't think we've had any discussion about what the plan actually is, and what the elements of that vision are that are gonna direct our decision when it comes to the map.
Yeah, true.
So I'm hoping maybe you can speak to that a little bit more, and tell us what direction you guys need from us as far as the vision part goes, and then how that relates to these other areas.
Well, I trying to assess the needs of this community and expectations. Obviously, I'm still learning, right? But I think the commission was very genuine in that they want to know what are your hot button topics. What kind of guidance do you want to give them as they begin the process of working on a new general plan? So I think that's what they were asking for you to do. Certainly that's not something you can do in a single meeting. And you'll only come up with probably kind of like the big picture, kind of an outline. We will have to do a lot more work on that. That's a longer term, I think, response that we need. But I agree. I mean, as I've been studying the general plan documents and trying to understand what this community is all about, I think that there does need to be more effort there. I think I was having a conversation with Gordon about, it's amazing what this community has accomplished. You really have done some phenomenal things. And when we started, from the days of incorporation, there was just so much blank slate here. There was just almost too much to plan in detail. And so you had kind of this higher level plan, and you basically were very reactionary. As projects came in, you started to try and judge, does this meet the intent of our plan? Does this fit in with the community values and the Harriman feel? But I think we were, as evident by a number of changes that just kept happening. I look back on your agendas, your council and planning commission agendas, and I was just shocked at seeing how much work you were all doing, meeting after meeting after meeting, all the changes. It was impressive. But that's what I was talking about. I think though we've risked that we've kind of lost that predictability. I think we've kind of lost faith in what the plan talks about because we've wanted to be amendable. I think at this point in time though, the number of parcels that are left for planning, I think this next round we can apply a little more detail. We can create a little greater vision of expectation. You know, let's focus in, I think, a little bit more on this next version, and we're going to need to have both the maps and the text. And I'm so happy to see that you're concerned for that, because some communities just blow past that and they just focus on the map alone. And when you're sitting with a developer, an applicant, the maps alone are just not enough to convey the value and vision of the community. You've got to have both. The text is very important as we are analyzing and justifying our recommendations to the community, the commission, and the council. But that's a much larger effort, I think. And that's what we were trying to get at earlier, is this is going to be a process that we're all going to need to work together on.
I would like to express my agreement with Jared that as I look at these developments coming through, I intend to be going through and looking at our document as we have now for not just the map, but for what vision is actually expressed in that document on all of the other pages. I want to be open and clear with the developers. That is my expectation as well. And because that's what we have set and previous councils have set as our guiding document. So please direct those developers back to the entire document and not just the zoning pages, so that they know for now that is, as an individual, what I would like to see when they bring something to the council.
Well, you guys have heard this from me a million times, but as a resident, I mean, the reason I'm sitting here is because of the development. I was watching, we'd done our homework before we bought the place. We had called the city, found out what was zoned behind us. It was in the county. We knew that if it was gonna come in, it'd have to go through the process. I knew as a somewhat farm kid that nobody doesn't plow a field for 2 years in a row, so I started calling around and asking what's going on. The city says we don't know, county says we don't know, and we see surveyors going out there, and 2 weeks later I get a note in the mail. So when I finally talked to somebody at the city, it was, well, go to the general plan. So so as a resident, you go to the general plan and you read all of this, and then you go to the meetings and you look and go, you guys are totally ignoring all of this. Like, none of this matters. Why did you tell me to go to this if you're not telling the developers to go to it? So I'm hoping as part of this process, and I know the residents are largely hoping that we're gonna address this part before we go into making decisions on
I
that.
agree. Yeah, that would be my philosophy as well.
So having said that, I know we wanna talk about the other two and kinda how we can go through that. So
A comment first on, just to piggyback on what's already been said, I agree that it can't be just about the map. It has to be about what is conveyed in the text there, and to your point, that entails a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so I will bring that back to what I mentioned in the work meeting, that I think we need to strongly consider engaging the services of a consultant when we get into that much detail. I don't think with what we have going on in the city that our staff has the time to dive into it at the level that we're talking about, but that we all, I think, agree needs to happen. I realize that comes at a cost, but I'll express my opinion of that. I think that we need to be considering that and looking at that and preparing to move in that direction, at least to entertain what the costs would be associated with that, so that we can make that decision moving forward. But I think that in order to do this the way that we're talking about, we are going to need additional help to make that happen.
I agree. whatever the cost is, will be nominal in the end for what we get out of it.
Agreed. Okay. I don't know.
You wanna talk about these two then?
Well, we can talk. Yeah, so the two developments, we didn't really want to go through too much tonight on the site, the plan, other than I briefly do. Now that I think about it. I decided I did earlier, but now I remember I said that. So there's two things. We're hearing that there's an interest from the old council, the ones from last year and the ones from this year, that we don't want to necessarily hold up these two developers unnecessarily. We want to move forward as
I think as we've talked, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, or at least my general feeling has been that if we kind of unanimously agree that they fit the bill for our vision going forward, if the residents are on board, there's no reason to hold them up unnecessarily for the process, the general plan, the complete process it has to go to.
right, because at this point, both plans have met all the processes that are actually required by law. So anything else we do is things that we want to have happen. There's no more process that we have to do at this point, other than put it on the agenda in a public meeting and vote. But what we want to do is, it sounded like there was some great interest by the council to maybe keep talking to some of the residents, making sure they're comfortable with it. And that process, we totally don't want to interfere with. What we want to make sure as a staff is that we're ready for when you are bringing that in. And so if there is like a, if we're thinking, so the next meeting's the 25th, 24th of just January, and then the next meeting's the 14th, Valentine's Day. Sweet. Of, I expect to see hearts on all the PowerPoints, people. And that's going to be February 14th and then February 28th. So what we're saying is that these plans are going through a little bit of metamorphosis. They're working with the residents. Some of the things that have been talked about is, we'll go to the dancing plan. There's a portion in here that they wanted to, they've agreed to eliminate the townhomes, do single family, but that incurred some additional costs and difficulties for them in terms of the open space. And so one of the options that we've discussed with the developer was provision to give land in lieu of land. Land outside the project in lieu of land inside the project, if the council was amenable to that.
Is that allowed in our code?
Okay, let's talk about that. So that's what came up today, thanks Brent, is that it was in our code till the last meeting of the city council in January, and through the rewrite, it got rewritten out. So it doesn't exist anymore. We discovered that today as we were talking about it.
It was not intentional though.
But I don't believe it was intentional, because we never had that discussion with the council or the planning commission. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is, we think there's probably still some merit in having that in the code. Basically, it just said the city council has the option to accept fee in lieu of or property. One of the reasons that was there is if a developer was doing a 15-acre and they were going to do a little pocket park, the city council could get money in lieu of and not have to maintain so many little parks, but put it into a bigger park. So it gave the city council, only the council, the flexibility to look at a project and determine if they want other properties or other lands, as opposed to so it just gave you flexibility in this. This is a case where that would have applied. So the first thing we want to ask you is, we would like to bring this to the planning commission, putting this ordinance back in, just the way it was written previously. Let the planning commission have their public hearing, have their vote, send it to the council if you're amenable to that. And then we have that ability to do that. Today, at this moment, you do. So back to your question, Mayor, we do not have the ability to do it. But we don't think that was intentional. We think that was a computer glitch. It wasn't a user glitch, it was a computer glitch.
Is the computer named Gordon?
We don't know, we haven't named all the computers, so that we believe, if you're interested, we'd like to bring that back, not, go through the process.
I think that's an easy one.
What's-
Why would we
Yeah.
not want that
What-
option?
What's the, do we, just real quick, do we
It's
have
not saying we would want to do
text
it from
that
here
we're
for sure,
missing?
but
Do we have the text that we can see real quick right now?
No, we didn't, we just discovered it today, and we have to bring it to the planning commission.
Yeah. So I'm open to it as long as that text,
We think it got pulled out inadvertently, it was never discussed by the council or planning commission to come out, so we believe it should have stayed in there.
and like I said, I don't have any issue with it, please bring it back, as long as it's clear that, with that property trade has to be equitable to the.
The council gets to decide what equity is.
But
so this isn't saying we're deciding on this, just that.
I'm just, I know,
I think it had something like that.
I would just like to ensure that that is in the code, cause that's what we're gonna be held to. That our expectation is if you do that, it is equitable to the value or how, the dollar, however we wanna word it, is equitable to what we would have given up. And yes, that resides with us to determine, but I wanna make sure that it's clear in the code that that's our intent.
I think we can go back to the text that was already adopted.
We'll
first
bring
and
you the
foremost.
text and anything you want to
Well,
change.
that's why I had asked to see that.
The second piece is this. It's gonna take us several meetings with the planning commission and to you to get that back in. In the meantime, would you like us to engage with the developer to look at properties and bring you back if that ordinance was there? So we can do this in a parallel process or a linear process, and so, our thought would be is we'd want to do this in a parallel process, but we want the council to not approve anything, just suggest that we can go ahead and start negotiation and bring you a proposal back for that kind of scenario. If you're comfortable with us bringing that, if you're saying no, we still think we ought to bring the other ordinance back, but we want to start talking to them so that we don't have to wait.
2 months before.
I think
It
it
would
would be, if we're talking and given some direction that we wanna see that ordinance come back, I think it'd be somewhat disingenuous of us to say that we wouldn't allow you to
We won't talk to you until.
start
intent is
pursuing
clear,
that,
so,
Okay.
yes.
if we're saying that wanna consider putting that back in, so
Right.
However,
I
as
would-
part of that, maybe gives us some additional direction, like my initial gut reaction is I would prefer fee and lieu,
And
right?
that-
So that we can do what you said and acquire property that we really want for programmable space, not trade it for another spot on Hillside.
Okay, so this ordinance allowed either fee in lieu of or property. It gave the council the option.
And that's okay for the ordinance.
Yeah.
I'm saying for,
For this, it sounds like you're more of a fee, so. figure out-
without seeing anything, that's,
Right.
I'm just saying that's my gut reaction.
I'm willing, again, for that parallel track to take place, so that we can consider.
We'll bring you a
Both
property
options.
option, and then if that doesn't work, you always have the fee option, because fees is just a number, we don't have to do a lot of work. Property option, we have to meet with property owners, get some values, get things moving.
If you think that there's something good, yeah, bring it to us.
We'll bring you some options. The only thing that's good is what you approve. If you don't approve it, it's not good.
So, I guess the question I have then, Gordon, in relation to these two properties that we're talking about is, they have met all the criteria and been through the process, we've already established that. But what I'm hearing now is probably on both properties, there's proposed changes to those. So I think the question is where do we take them from now with changes? And I think one of the frustration that I've heard expressed and expressed myself over time is that there was frustration when it left the planning commission and when there was changes in between that space before it got to the city council. And so I don't wanna fall back into that and perpetuate that same
That's a good question.
process that caused frustration amongst planning commission, city council, staff, all the way along the way. So again, not knowing all of the details in this, I think what I'm hearing is if we're considering changes on that we probably need to consider sending it back to the planning commission first and foremost to have them look at those potential changes. Again, I don't know all those details, but I know that's one of the frustrations that was expressed before of again, leaving planning commission and then something totally different being presented to the city council when I got there.
My only, I don't wanna say objection to that, but question to that. I understand the logic there, but procedurally, one, I think it depends on how substantial the changes are. Second, if we're making changes that are in line with our vision for the new general plan, what is the planning commission
They have
going
to
to do?
recommend based on the old one, so.
Right? Because then we're, because that's their job is
They have to recommend based on the current general plan.
based on the current, so if those changes are changes we want to be in line with our vision of the new general plan, what is the planning commission going to hold as a standard?
Good question.
Fair point.
The other concern I would have in that is whether or not we even currently have enough planning commissioners to vote on one of these, particular items when we have planning commissioners that may need to recuse themselves. Do we have a quorum to even vote on these items? And so that's the hope, but we can't, I'm concerned that we don't, and,
But I don't think we hold up or try and change the process on I hope. Does that make sense? We know how many, we've still got 5 active planning commissioners, right?
6,
so what's the requirement
6.
for a quorum?
4.
4.
4, so
But-
so 2 could recuse themselves as still.
Oh yeah, there is 6,
technically
yes,
vote.
I missed one.
So I guess I'm thinking, going back to Jared's point, is that if you already realize that you're gonna make some changes to those 2 particular properties as a result of your vision, the planning commission is not going to help you unless that old plan is your vision. Because they technically have to go back to the old.
I would want their input, but from a procedural point,
No,
as I started thinking about
fair
that
point.
after Thursday, it's like, well, I understand the desire to kind of follow through that, but if their job is to hold it to that standard and we're wanting.
We're just gonna change it anyways.
Yeah, I hadn't thought it, so here,
No, that's a great
So
point.
maybe if we've gotten to the point where we feel we wanna move forward with them, we have that joint meeting with them and talk about their concerns, or have them look it over and send it back to us, sort of thing, which, sorry, I forgot to ask this question earlier. There was mention they were gonna send us some of their concerns for us to discuss tonight, I never saw anything.
I don't see it either.
What?
I've never received any input.
So they have no
Too
input?
forward.
they may be wanting to give it to us at the city, at their next planning commission. But back to this issue, the plan that staff made recommendations to and the planning commission both have changed, in my mind, substantially. We have talked to both developers, and we have not, staff has not seen what the final plan is. So we don't have any recommendations to you today. But what we'd like to do is work with the developers on a plan before the next city council meeting, so that you have a chance, at least one meeting in a public forum, to review the recommendations of the plan that you're going to act on. And again, when you act on a plan, you can act with conditions and with change, you have that ability to do that. But what we don't wanna have happen is for us to go to a meeting when you're ready to act on a plan, and we don't have the conditions in place, and we're all discussing from the podium and from wherever we're sitting, well, what about this? Do we wanna talk about this kind of issue? And then try to piece it together in a live meeting. I don't think it would serve the public or the council. So I'd rather bring you a clean set of recommendations, have a public discussion on those recommendations, and then you can bring it back to the next meeting with the amendments, with the direction you gave staff. And then it's a good process, because the public has seen those minutes, heard the comments, and now they see that changes.
It's my understanding from the developers, they're pretty much ready to provide those to us. They're just kind of waiting for direction from staff. My suggestion, and this is a suggestion, tell me what you feel, is that we allow the planning commission to see us at a work meeting, to look at it for any concerns they might have that aren't any sort of official recommendation, and communicate those concerns back to us, so that when we see it, we have an opportunity to also hear maybe what our planning commissioners would think before we have to go out and make decisions.
So the question I have with that, at this stage, is still kind of the same. What are we asking them to compare it to? What are we asking them for? We haven't given them our vision for the general plan.
And that's valid. I'm thinking when we see things like this, they could look at the things that they tend to specialize in, which is the roads and the allocations, just to give us some input if there's any glaring errors that we're not going to catch because we haven't spent that same amount.
And I agree with that. What I'm thinking kind of the opposite, procedural wise, is if we're determining the vision of what we want it to be, then I would think that we would want to see it at some work meetings and talk through that in this body. But then we can pass it on to the planning commission and say, this is kind of what our vision is. Give us your expertise on all of those things. Right? Because otherwise they're guessing what does the council want.
Yeah,
right?
I can see that.
See what we want them to base their vision.
I would just, suggest that we, create a clear timeline now so that everyone has the same expectations.
So along those lines, what I would maybe propose, tell me what you guys think, but I really think we need to have a serious discussion on the vision itself, the text, and how that's going to guide us in the rest of those decisions. If we can have that discussion, agree on those things, then absolutely, I think that clears the way, shows the residents that we're listening, that we're including these elements, whatever we agree to, and applying it to what they bring to us, and then we can set work meetings and bring them in and put a schedule together and get them through.
So one of the things that Mike said, and the last 3 days, we've been all reading the general plan and understanding the text from it. And the concern I have is the timeline to get that vision verbalized, because I think we would have a discussion, there'd be a lot of input, and we would take that input and we'd spend the next week trying to incorporate that into clear statements, bring it back to you to review again, and it may take several iterations before I think we could wordsmith something that you're going to say that is my vision in text and we don't even want you to do it totally in text. We want to have pictures and visuals and things so we don't have to put as many words into it. And so my thought would be is the visual that you're seeing from the Danzy and Addison project, if those projects represent your words in a plan, then that may be enough to move those two projects forward.
I'm just worried that if we don't give it at least some attention, and I understand.
I know, it's just, he said it was gonna take a long time.
It will take a while to craft everything. I'm thinking there's gotta be some core components that we can probably agree on to apply to those and come back and work through a lot of the details.
We can do that. So let me suggest, just thinking out loud, these are just, it's probably not even suggestions, think out loud. So we have a city council meeting on the 24th. And it's really great that there's nothing on that agenda.
Okay, before we go any further, John, as the attorney, can you help me understand what rights they have vested at this point? And what, because I could see one of the developers or both of them coming back and saying, well, we're vested, and so we can just do this anyways. So can you help us understand what the legal on these options are?
Yeah, off the record. Maybe in a closed meeting.
Okay.
I would just say that.
At least I would.
John gets to say stuff like that. Holy cow.
I would venture to say we're at a point, and I don't know what you guys' discussions have been, but I think we're at a point in the process where everybody's at the table, but the developers have expressed their willingness to go through the process as long as we don't drag it out too far. So
And
we need to know that for
Right.
sure.
I would add that we've all been talking about these projects for a long time anyways. So I don't think, in terms of your point to try and put some words to what the vision is, I think we're all familiar enough and have spent enough time on these already that, at least in regards to these two, we could come pretty quickly to what we really think the vision of those two are. And then take that out more broadly to encompass the entire community at that point. But I think it's important. You are a trooper tonight, Nicole.
Oh.
Thank you so much for being
But again, I think if we do what you're doing, but bring that down to just a little bit more specific to those two, I think we could come to that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because we all know what the concerns that we've heard, we all know what our own concerns were going through those process, and we could probably formulate that pretty quickly and then again move those projects forward.
So I think if we just bring those in and try to just
Yes.
to those,
Just-
that discussion, we
just-
run afoul of public sentiment in the referendum. I mean, we have some explaining to do, kind of the process that's happened already. To Sherry's point, like, there's some education that needs to go with it, and I think we have to, I don't think it has to be the complete text, to me, it's kind of 3 or 4 core tenets.
Yeah.
You know, that we agree to apply to those.
And I think we can come to those pretty.
And like you said, there's a lot of work that's
focusing for those two.
and there's a lot of work that's already been done. Okay, these are the tenets we want, the elements we wanna make sure are included in those. We move forward, and then we come back around and complete the vision for, the entire city.
Yes.
Tighten up all the details and.
So to make sure that we have enough time, does staff feel like they have, for a closed session, does staff feel like they have the direction they need to move forward?
Well, I wanted, yes, but here,
I know, that's what Grady's thinking.
so in talking to developers, we haven't had their new plans submitted to us, so we don't really have anything to go off of what the new plans look like. We've heard words, they've said things to us, so we have a good idea of the changes that they're talking about. They have expressed a concern about this process extending beyond February. And I'm not saying that's anything that the council has to set as a deadline or needs to say it is, but if we're going to reach that, we're going to need you to be
Available.
looking at the conditions and the final plans pretty early in the process, because the last thing we don't want to have happen is the last meeting in February is to bring you the conditions and the final plan for approval that night, and there's a lot of pressure to do that. We want to use our time on the 25th, 24th, and Valentine's Day very effectively to make sure we're putting on the agenda in the work meeting and maybe in the general meeting the discussion that went on in the work meeting of what happened, and then the next, just making sure you're transparent to the public, you're very clear on these things, but we need the 2 weeks between today and the 24th to really get you a packet that you can give us some real good verbals on and say, this is not it, this is it, and we'll make those changes, clean them up, go back to the developer, say, no, you gotta make addition, whatever the issues are, I'm not saying we'll do that or not, but we just need, I think we need to put them on the agenda for the 24th with a full packet. So we would go to the developers and give us everything you got, what you've got gleaned from the public, what you've gleaned from the council. Let us see that, write up something, and bring it back to and present it.
I'm great with that, as long as there is adequate time in that meeting to have this discussion first.
I'm gonna knock off other people's stuff off the agenda. We'll work on that.
Cause I agree, I hear a lot of rush, push. I just wanna make sure that we have, and I understand that, but are you saying, no, we need to have it done before the end of February?
I'm saying
That was the feeling that.
I
just
gave
wanna
you
make
that feeling
sure.
on purpose, but I didn't.
I'll step my neck out a little bit and say, I think both developers have shown a lot of goodwill
Yeah,
to
I
this
agree.
point and have been patient. I would, at least, again, I don't
I think the
say everything, but I would say staff definitely needs to meet with them and look at their plans for changes they've made so that they can provide us that information. And we need to have this discussion and look at those that night work meeting. And do what we can that night to give them some direction from that point forward. That's not saying we're making decisions and telling them we want you to change this or change that, it's so that we can kinda all get on the same page and they can see a way forward.
I think the opportunity exists to do what Gordon is asking or hoping that we can accomplish. I think I'm hearing that this body is willing to do our part. We just need the developers on their side to do their part, and I think that the opportunity exists to still accomplish and meet everybody's needs. But it's gonna take work on both sides.
Yeah, so,
Yes.
alright, I think,
Work session.
did you hear something?
Yeah.
Did you hear something? I heard something.
I'll find out if we all heard the same thing or not.
All right,
Work
so
session, yes.
at this time, we will need a motion to adjourn the work meeting and move into go into closed session.
To that point.
So moved.
Well, you have to
We
wait
have
the
to
whole thing gets
identify the
closed.
I'll do it, I've got it. So I'll make a motion to actually, are we recessing?
No, just go into closed meeting.
No, we have to recess the work
Okay.
meeting.
Okay.
Make a motion to temporarily recess the council work meeting to convene a closed session for the purpose to discuss pending or reasonable imminent litigation and the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property as provided by Utah Code annotated 52-4-205.
Second.
Okay, I have a
So,
motion and a second. Clint?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Sherry?
just wait.
I'll vote yes. Thank you for those who have not been
Porter,
invited.
Gordon, Alan, Mike,
Talk to Robert.
Justin, and myself, Wendy and Blake, and John. Richie, go home, go to bed. No, Tammy, let's put that.
Chief, this is gonna be pretty minor.
I didn't say my name.
Oh, and that's council.
Turn the recording off.
Take it easy.
Text you, yeah, because you're daddy work.
Good try.
My name is.